Hi, and welcome back to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is August 28th, and today we're going to hear part 2 of the article that we started yesterday entitled Lost in Meaning, National Idioms. Yesterday, we looked at a number of English idioms, some of which are still used a lot, some not used so often. So let's go Dutch. It's something I think just about everybody here knows. Every Chinese speaker seems to know this expression. Another one is Dutch courage. That is not used very often, so it's good to understand it, but you probably don't need to use it yourself. If it's a really young English speaker, they probably won't even understand you.
Right. Liquid courage. That's something you won't understand until you understand drinking culture. And then the third one was pardon my French.
Right, which is extremely common.
Yep.
That's something you can use.
I want to say go Dutch. I'm going to rank these. Go Dutch, best to know.
Right.
Pardon my French, close second. Distant third, classic Dutch courage.
Take it or leave it, right? Okay, so today we're going to introduce 5 more, and here we go. So, D. Lily. At a party, my friend Anna suddenly vanished. She took French leave, someone remarked. I was confused. Had she gone to France? It turns out the idiom means leaving without notifying anyone. In the 18th century, the English used this phrase to criticize the French, though ironically, the French said the same about the English.
E. Jason. When I studied abroad in Japan, I wanted to blend in. My host mom advised, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. She explained that it meant I should follow local customs while living there. This saying dates back to the 4th century when St. Augustine was told to follow Roman fasting rules during a visit to the city.
F. Tiffany. While watching the news, I heard a critic say, this is like Chinese whispers. From the context, I could tell he meant that information can get distorted as it spreads. The term comes from a game where a message is passed down the line and often ends up completely changed by the time it reaches the last person. Chinese was used because the language seemed difficult to English speakers.
G. Daniel. During a heated argument about our project, none of us was willing to compromise. A real Mexican standoff, someone sighed. The term describes a tense situation where no side can act without risking severe consequences. It likely came from past conflicts between the U.S. and Mexico.
H. Erica. In math class, I stared blankly at the complex equations and said, it's all Greek to me. My classmates nodded in agreement. In the past, Greek symbolized something incomprehensible because the language was unfamiliar to most people in England. Back to the beginning, D. Lily. At a party, my friend Anna suddenly vanished. Now, that does not mean that she vanished like a ghost into thin air. It just means that she left. She took French leave, someone remarked. Now, as Chris and I were discussing earlier, some of these expressions are more common than others. I'd put this one in the middle. I think most people still understand it, but we don't use it that often.
That's right. I have heard this expressed as a French exit, although very rarely. How I grew up knowing this was the Irish goodbye.
Ah, now we're blaming somebody else. Okay. All right, so she took French leave. It simply means that she left without saying anything, because normally when we leave, for example, a party, we will say goodbye to the host and the other people at the party and say, oh, I have to get to work early tomorrow, so I guess I'll be leaving now. You know, see you some other time, blah, blah, blah. So she did not say anything to anybody, and she just left. Now, I have done this on occasion, but usually it's a huge party where you don't know all the people.
Yeah, I agree. The only time I have ever done this was when I was invited to a party where I didn't really know many people, maybe not even the host, because in college, you just show up to someone's house and have a party.
That's right.
You might throw them $10 to pay for what you're drinking or whatever. Yeah, that's the only time. I personally would not feel comfortable leaving a party without saying goodbye. It's considered stylish among some people to just leave a party. That's the cool way to leave a party. You don't need to say goodbye. I don't care, man. I'm not cool. I'm saying goodbye to my friends and the people that hosted me because, I don't know, I like to show appreciation.
So if you tried to say goodbye in that situation you described, they say, who are you?
Yeah.
In that case, you wouldn't really want to bother saying
hey,
goodbye.
Man, great party. They're like, I didn't host this party. I don't know whose house this is.
Exactly. That happens. All right. So I was confused. Had she gone to France? Well, that's the first thing you might think of. You know, you're leaving and you're going to France, which sounds kind of silly in the context of a party. It turns out the idiom means leaving without notifying anyone, as we just explained. In the 18th century, the English used this phrase to criticize the French, though ironically the French said the same about the English. Now, this was fun for me to check because I've been working on my French recently, so I wanted to find the exact phrase that they use in French. And in fact, I had heard it before on the radio. Used in context, people just use it normally because it's a common phrase in French. The phrase is filer à l'anglaise. Filer means to take off, you know, to just run.
Right.
And then à l'anglaise is in the style of English people. So in case you want to know the phrase, it's filer, F-I-L-E-R, filer à l'anglaise.
So today we don't often think of most parties, especially house parties, as structured with a lot of rules. But as I just expressed, I personally don't usually feel comfortable leaving the party without at least saying goodbye. And this is a cultural artifact. It is. Now, if we go back in time to the 1700s, when we kind of talked about the 1700s and 1600s yesterday, there were many more rules about dinner parties because they were almost exclusively held by the upper classes and very wealthy, when at a time their parties were extremely rigid and there were many rules. It was considered very rude to get up and go use the bathroom during a dinner party. So in 1601, the Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe died of a burst bladder because it was considered rude to leave the table to go to the bathroom.
How awful.
He drank a lot, and he was such a gentleman that he died of a burst bladder. And in his obituaries, the stories they told about him, it wasn't like this guy died because he was too embarrassed to go to the bathroom. Instead, everyone just said what a wonderful gentleman, that he was willing to sacrifice his life for being a proper gentleman. It's just crazy to think about.
Politeness is not always the most important thing.
Certainly with your health on the line. Let's go to letter E. When I studied abroad in Japan, I wanted to blend in. You didn't want to stand out.
Yes, and I have this experience having lived in a host family in Mexico and in Germany. There are a lot of rules you're not even aware of that you're going to have to keep trying to learn about in order to fit in.
My host mom advised, when in Rome, do as the Romans do.
Which is kind of funny, but in fact, in Japanese, as in many languages, they have borrowed a lot of expressions from English.
Usually this phrase can be just simply shortened to when in Rome, and people know this phrase so well that you don't even have to say the back half, but make sure you learn the whole thing. She explained that it meant I should follow local customs while living there.
Right. It sounds like she was trying very hard to make her exchange student feel more comfortable.
This saying dates back to the 4th century when St. Augustine was told to follow Roman fasting rules during a visit to the city.
Now, I noticed that you hesitated a tiny bit.
That's right, because I was thinking about how I should say this, and Karen gave me a good argument. So I initially said this as St. Augustine because there's a city in Florida called St. Augustine. But Karen correctly pointed out we're not talking about the city in Florida. We're talking about the actual saint who has a Latin name, and that would be pronounced Augustine, like the month August. So it's not Augustine. That's just the way the people in Florida grew up saying it, but that's how I heard it. And I think that maybe you should pay attention to both, but I definitely side with Karen's argument here. St. Augustine is a better way to say this. All right, very quickly before we move on, let's look at the word fasting. You already know this word because you know the word breakfast, which is literally break your fast. A fast is a period of time that you don't eat any food, especially for religious reasons. But today, this word most commonly, fast, is found in the word breakfast. Of course, we don't pronounce it the same way, but it's actually the same thing. We're done not eating. Let's eat and go work on the farm.
This is a bit unrelated, but using the word fast as a verb out of context, people may not understand because it's not so common. Well, actually, it is common in our culture now because people fast in order to lose weight, for example.
Maybe intermittent fasting.
That's right.
In a context, I think people would get it. But if you just said the word fast, I'm going to say
Speed.
99 out of 100 people are going to say speed. That's right.
So anyway, I went to this French pronunciation workshop where the teacher was teaching 2 words in French that are extremely similar, and she was trying to explain what one of them meant, and she kept saying fast. And one of the students kept looking puzzled. I said, like not eating? He said, oh, that fast. He was not getting it at all. So that's why I'm saying people may not understand you right away. And just in case you're curious, I'm going to tell you what the 2 words were, and I want to see if you can hear the difference between them. The words are the word for young in French, which is jeune, jeune. And the word for too fast or a fast in French is jeune. Jeune.
Maybe in the vowel sound? That's tough.
Yeah, I'll do it again. So, jeune and jeune. One of them has more lip rounding. The word for fast is jeune with lots of lip rounding. Jeune doesn't have all that lip rounding.
I would absolutely struggle with that.
A lot of people do, and that's why we spent a lot of time on it in that particular class. Let's move on to F. Tiffany. While watching the news, I heard a critic say, this is like Chinese whispers. This is a game that I actually played with my students one year. So I said, okay, here's what you have to tell the next person. Or maybe they picked their own story and then they told the next person. And we went around the whole class, and by the end, it was unrecognizable. You could not even recognize the original story. It was so different. And I study information theory myself. It's a personal interest. And in any system where information is going from point A to point B, there's something in the middle called noise, and that's going to distort the message. And this is an example of how it works.
Did you call the game Chinese Whispers?
Yes.
So I grew up during the Cold War.
I called it a Chinese Whisper. I didn't use, this is the Chinese Whisper game.
Okay.
I didn't use the S.
So number one for me, I'll just say this is one we absolutely would not want to say today as white people because it implies something about another color. This is a danger phrase to me. Growing up during the Cold War, we called it Russian gossip.
Oh.
But it was more commonly called telephone. And that was the safe way because there were nobody's color or nationality involved. But we were okay making fun of the Russians in the 80s, so we called it Russian gossip.
Chinese Whisper or the Chinese Whisper game is still acceptable now. Some of the other names for it are broken telephone, operator, telephone game, grapevine, gossip, secret message. So they had a whole bunch of different names for it. And in Chinese, it says that, what do they call it in Chinese? So like we just talked about, to take French leave in French actually means to take English leave. Well, in Chinese, they say goose to goose.
Goose to goose.
And there's a reason for it. I'm going to have to use Chinese
for this. Can you?
For
because
this.
I can't think how you would say goose to goose like this.
I wondered too, and then I looked it up online and I found the reason. The reason is because there is a Chinese game that's called 以讹传讹, and 讹 is a 言字旁, 一个文化的化, 那个念讹, it means mistake. So that means you take a mistake and you pass the mistake along. Right. So 以讹传讹, but 讹 is pronounced exactly like the word for goose.
Right. I hear the word goose when you say that. I visualize goose. Yeah, that's how I hear it.
But the original character meant mistake.
Interesting.
And so that's how it developed into, now they call the game in Chinese 讹传讹, 以讹传讹, with a goose. That's really interesting.
Very interesting. I agree. This is such an interesting thing to dive into.
Okay, from the context, I could tell he meant that information can get distorted as it spreads. This happens in all information systems. If you want to know more about it, look up Claude Shannon. He's the one who wrote about it. The term comes from a game where a message is passed down the line and often ends up completely changed by the time it reaches the last person. And for that reason, it's a pretty fun game.
Do you consider yourself reliable at transferring message, or do you think are you likely to distort the message as it spreads, not purposefully, but accidentally?
I am totally average. So sometimes I'll get it right. Sometimes I'll remember it in my own way, which somehow is different from how it was intended. Right. So what we do in any language, not just English, is if you hear a message from somebody, you're not going to remember the words they used. You're going to remember the content.
Right.
And since you're a different person, you'll probably express the same content in a different way. You're going to choose different words. And that's one way these distortions happen.
Very interesting.
Chinese was used because the language seemed difficult to English speakers. And in general, that is still true. But I have to say, on the other hand, there are more and more Westerners who know some Chinese and some whose Chinese is really awesome.
If you're calling it awesome, it's really impressive because for most Taiwanese people, my Chinese is very good, and you're on a whole different level than me. So these people must be ridiculous.
There are some people with amazing Chinese. They write whole books in Chinese.
That's very, very impressive.
It is impressive. Okay.
All right. Very briefly, just before we move on, I just got to state again, please be careful if you are not the same color as a person. If there are any white people that are listening to this and they don't know that this is a danger phrase, if you're white, please don't say this. You might find yourself in trouble. If you are white and making fun of the French or Dutch, great, fine. I don't think most of them care. This is one I personally would not say.
The Chinese whisper?
I would not personally say this. I would call it telephone or any of those other names. For me, knowing the way, especially that you mentioned the internet either yesterday or today, this is a phrase that I think a lot of people would jump on personally. I would consider this a dangerous phrase to me.
I totally understand that, but as an English teacher in Taiwan, they found it kind of fun to think that there's a name of a game in English that uses Chinese.
That's right. And I think this is good context because Taiwanese people would think this is a funny way.
Yeah.
Oh, this is funny. I'm not taking offense to this. I know Karen is not this person. On the internet, everyone is kind of anonymous.
Jumping on everything.
And they jump on everything because they believe everybody has ill intention.
So be careful.
Yeah. Okay.
And cultural appropriation as well. That means you're borrowing something from another culture and not giving them credit for it. We'll leave that for another day. Let's move on to G.
Letter G, Daniel. During a heated argument about our project, none of us was willing to compromise.
Oh, that's not a good situation.
A real Mexican standoff, someone sighed. So, okay, we got to stop right here. So we have a couple phrases. Standoff is one word, and you will often see these in Hollywood movies. I guarantee you have seen pictures of this. You got three guys in great-looking suits, and they got a gun in each hand, and they're standing in a triangle, and they're pointing the guns at each other. And if one person shoots, then the other people start shooting, and they all die. So that's a Mexican standoff. Now that you could visualize this, the meaning of this is probably super, super simple. So the term describes a tense situation where no side can act without risking severe consequences. Because
as Chris has just described.
That's right. If I shoot, I'm going to get shot. And so everybody's in a very dangerous situation.
And everybody is just stuck. You can just stand there. It's
but
what
man,
happens
their suits
eventually.
look so good.
Yeah.
There's always like some guy, he says something. So this is what happens. Some guy walks in and he says something so smooth that everybody puts their guns down. Or like the guy karate kicks the one gun and dodges the other. It's so unbelievable.
That's Hollywood.
All right. It likely came from past conflicts between the U.S. and Mexico, and boy, were there a lot of fights between the U.S. and Mexico.
And very complicated. If you're going to study that history, you better be ready for a lot of confusion.
And a lot of fighting, and honestly, some absolutely ridiculous stories. A very brief one. Teddy Roosevelt, the American president and a true wild man of history, was a part of a team called the Rough Riders, and he was certain that his glasses would get shot off his face. He told people this, so he packed multiple pairs of his famous round glasses.
Oh.
And in fact, his round glasses were shot off his face, and we have to think of the period of time this was. So these were made of like iron, right? These are real heavy glasses. And they, in fact, got shot off his face.
Oh, my gosh.
This is a future president of the United States. And he's like, it doesn't matter. And he takes out like more glasses and puts them back on and keeps riding and fighting. He was an unbelievable character. And this is just one of the many ridiculous stories that came out of the border fights between the U.S. and Mexico.
Okay, we're going to move on to our last story for today, our last idiom for today, H. Erica. In math class, I stared blankly at the complex equations and said, it's all Greek to me. This is extremely common. We do say this a lot. So it's all Greek to me means I don't understand a bit because most people just don't know Greek unless you're a Greek heritage learner or you studied Greek. Not that many people at least in relative terms. So my classmates nodded in agreement. They understood, and they didn't understand the equations either. In the past, Greek symbolized something incomprehensible because the language was unfamiliar to most people in England and the U.S. and other English-speaking countries as well. One thing that's interesting is in other languages, they don't necessarily say, it's Greek to me.
Okay.
Here's a list of some of the languages that they say, oh, it's all something to me.
I can't wait to hear this.
All right, in German, they often say Spanish.
It's all Spanish to me.
Yeah, Spanish is not a difficult
right.
language, but they would say, oh, this is, for example, truck driver Spanish. That means truck driver language, I can't understand it. In German, they have a really funny one that says, I only understand train station. The reason is because if you've ever been in a train station in Germany, the public announcement system is very, very bad. So it's so bad that when they're announcing that your train is about to leave, they will say, that's all you can hear. You have no idea if it's your train or not. So they'll say, I can only understand train station language. Right. But in fact, that language is really hard to understand in Germany. They also use Chinese. In other languages besides German, here's a list of some of the languages that they say are difficult or that they would use in this kind of an idiom. Hindi, Latin, Volapük, which is an artificial language, an artificial international language, Russian, Hebrew, Javanese.
Right, okay, that's out there.
Yeah, High German. They will use that in the Netherlands because High German means an earlier form of the language they don't understand. Or Syriac, that was from the time of Jesus.
Yeah.
It might still be spoken. Telugu, which is from southern India. Farsi, which is the language of Iran, right? And also Turkish, Aramaic, and Ostrogoth.
Oh.
That was language of the Goths who invaded Europe after the Roman Empire fell. So that was kind of interesting.
So at least some of these use different style of scripts. It's all Spanish to me is goofy because the letters at least look the same.
Right.
Greek and Farsi and Hindi and
Telugu.
Telugu, I presume, look very different than the modern alphabet we're used to. So at least that makes sense to me.
Okay, we have a couple questions for you. For the first one, you're going to have to fill in 2 words from the passages from these 2 days, except they will be in a different form. First one, when I didn't want to go to the expensive restaurant my friend suggested, he called me blank. I said, well, okay then, but only if we all agree to go Dutch. So what did he call me for not wanting to go to an expensive restaurant? You can find that in yesterday's lesson. It's at the end of the one that says to go Dutch. It said that Dutch people were thought to be
stingy.
Stingy. We had the word stinginess, and here we need the adjective form stingy. And the second part of it is, however, just before the check came, one friend managed to blank without anyone noticing. It was a classic case of French leave, and we had to cover his share. That is really, really bad form.
I agree. And I wasn't sure of the answer until I saw the second sentence here, or technically our last sentence here. French leave means disappearing or vanishing without telling anyone that you will go. So this person did what? They vanished.
They managed to vanish, so you have to use the infinitive form of the verb. Number 3, from A to H in the above online posts, which ones mention idioms that have literal references to a specific language? This is a really tricky question. So that means they're not just saying Dutch courage, but they're talking about the actual language.
That's
what is
right.
The answer to this?
So the first one is pardon my French, and that's from letter C.
That's right. The second one is from letter F. Chinese whispers, they're talking about the actual Chinese language, or one of the many Chinese languages.
And the final one is H. It's all Greek to me, or it's all truck driver language.
Spanish. Very good. Number 4, which word in the online post means change so that it is no longer true, clear, or accurate? And the answer is?
Distorted, which we found in letter F about Chinese whispers.
And that's it for today. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.